organization like ours in that area really.
You can watch highlights.
Yeah, okay.
For us, we have a lot of transition.
The series on
now
Netflix
because we do a lot of
is
work
really
with
I started watching that and I
drivers,
just
so
thought,
somebody
not because
makes
I got
10,
work.
15 years post
run out of time.
Yeah, I got
and they will eventually,
watch it this
hopefully,
winter.
go back to work and get too busy to hang out with us is our goal.
Last week?
So we
last
often
weekend.
have at least
Went off pretty well.
150. And
Did it?
before COVID, 175 to 200.
Street course, that's unusual for F1.
Yeah, so a lot of those,
I would say
turnover, but there's some that we've had in our
Okay.
programs for 25
There's
years.
quite a few street courses.
Just depends on what they need. And then across the province, there's thousands. We figure
I think so.
we're just trying to get
That's the first time.
statistics on brain injury
Yeah.
been organized, so at least over 4,000.
They had a race in the 80s, but it was
Get
just in
supported through
parking lot.
organizations like ours.
So it really
And then
didn't
there's
count.
health authorities.
I think, oh yeah, I just
Also,
threw there.
that kind of work. And mental
Yeah,
health.
it was
So there's thousands out there every year. That's a big deal. Even don't get support.
big bucks to go.
Thanks for asking. Always happy to share.
Expensive sport.
How are we doing?
We're good. We just can't do a sound check with Ted and Tanis. Ted,
know
can you
when.
hear us? Ah, perfect. Thank you. And then Tanis, can you hear me?
See,
Tanis?
they could hear if they were in person.
Okay, perfect.
Just saying.
Oh, I'm glad I'm here in person today.
I know.
So this is what you say about us when.
Yeah. They heard that.
All right, on that note, thanks Kevin for starting us off on a smile. We'll call this meeting of the Development of Transportation and Infrastructure Advisory Committee meeting to order, the one for November 23rd, that is. Just for your information, Councillor Sadhu is unable to be here today, so I am his alternate, and that's why you see me sitting here. Before we do any business, I just want to introduce and welcome Ryan Lucy to this table. And Ryan, of course, I don't know how many, you know some around the table, so we'll just quickly go around the table and do a quick intro so that you're familiarized with at least who's around this table. So we'll start over there and we go counterclockwise. Carol.
Sure, I'm usually a box on screen, but today I'm in person. I'm Carol Pegg-Powell. I'm the Executive Director of Fraser Valley Brain Injury Association.
Great.
Ken Friesen with Ridgepoint Homes and also representing the CHPA Fraser Valley out here.
Good morning. I'm happy to see you here today.
Yeah.
Yes. Kevin Miro, company Miro Contractors, a construction company based out of Abbotsford, here representing the Abbotsford Chamber of Commerce today.
Rob Quiring from IQ Engineering. We're structural engineers here in Abbotsford. And I had to check because I think I'm representing the consulting professional industry.
And I'm Councillor Lowen.
Mark Neal, General Manager, Planning and Development Services.
I'm Rob Isaac. I'm the General Manager of Engineering and Regional Utilities.
I'm Ryan Lucy, Senior Vice President for Polygon Homes and representing the development industry.
And our two members on the screen, starting with ladies first.
My name is Tanis Hatch, and I am the ICPC Road Safety and Community Coordinator for Abbotsford, and I focus on road safety education.
And I'm Ted Udelson, Vice President of Heritage Abbotsford Society.
Thank you. And by the way, for the on-screen members, as we get to any discussion, if I don't see your hand, you may just want to interject by saying, comment here, please, or something to that effect. But I'll try to catch your hands if you like to have the floor. All right, item number 2, adoption of agenda. Motion to adopt. Rob Quiring, second Ken. All in favor, I'm sure. Adoption of minutes for September 28th, 2023. I assume everyone's seen them, read them, reviewed them. Any comments, submissions, corrections?
Yeah. Just
Yes.
a comment, technicality on the last couple of points, where you have a couple of people being in favor of things and also being absent.
And sorry, and your point, sorry, was?
Oh, he's up both.
I don't understand how people could be both in favor of a motion and then be absent from the meeting.
Oh, I see. Okay, duly noted. Staff will take a look at that. Thank you. And it will be corrected. I missed that myself, but I wasn't here either. All right, is that right, staff? We're good with that?
Yeah, we're good with that.
Okay.
Sometimes what does happen is if an individual comes to the meeting, but let's say they go to the washroom or something,
Ah,
while the vote is being taken, then we don't count them as having voted.
okay, I see.
But we will double check the minutes.
Okay, Kevin?
I believe Ted was at the meeting, last meeting.
Okay.
The only thing is, on the very bottom is absent, he's noted as absent.
Oh, okay.
He's included in the rest of the meeting
Oh,
minutes.
yes, okay.
So we just need to strike that T,
We
Ted
will
out there.
definitely double check that.
Okay, thanks, Ted, for bringing that to our attention. With that correction, a motion to receive those minutes are Kevin, seconded by Carol?
I don't think I was at that meeting, actually.
Oh, you can still second it.
Okay. I will second.
Okay,
Carol.
all in favor? Carried. No presentations, no delegations, and brings us to our business while we're here. Reports, 6.1 Transportation Priority Initiatives, and Mike Kelly will take the floor. Mike, welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Chair and members of the committee. I'm pleased to be here today to present on some of the work our transportation team has been busy with. Previous reports from our department were very singular in focus, a specific policy or a project going on that we wanted the committee's feedback on. We felt this leaves a bit of a gap in the big picture of the work that's going on, the actual work that's happening in our community. And with the end of the year coming up, we're sort of naturally looking back on the year that was and is. And for this community, development that is occurring rapidly and our transportation infrastructure and projects need to be so connected that we felt it was beneficial to come here today to this committee and present our transportation priority initiatives. So with that, our agenda will walk through these points, and purpose is to provide the committee with an overview of the 2023 priority initiatives for the city. And we are going to get into these 9 topics: our road network, our bridges, our transit system, railway safety, cycling, walking, traffic calming, road safety, and the all-important Highway 1 widening that's coming. So starting with our asphalt rehab program, it begins with road quality data collection. We have a vehicle that drives all of our roads and produces a worst to first condition rating of our roads. Just for the committee's information, we then coordinate with our utilities department here, our underground water, sewer, and drainage, and also our third-party utilities, Fortis and BC Hydro, to make sure that we're coordinating the surface rehab with the underground works. So, sometimes the road quality, if has been reduced so much that the road must be resurfaced, we coordinate underground works to happen first. And other times the road can be in okay shape, but an underground utility is at the end of its life and we have to do a project on it. So most of these are driven by that data collection on that worst to first list, but some of these roads are informed by the underground works that have to go first. Another example of a road in town that I feel is noteworthy for this committee is the Marshall Road corridor project between McMillan and Timberland. It's an example of an urban road that was being underutilized and not meeting the demand or the need of the residents that travel it. It was only serving really vehicles for travel and parking. And this project, as you can see, this is just a snippet of one component of the project at an intersection where you can get an understanding of what a complete street really means. And it is an insight into some future work that we'll be doing in our community where Marshall Road was quite wide and we had a lot of need to serve cyclists, pedestrians, transit, parking, and travel. So where it was only really serving 2 of those, we now have an ability to put an improved infrastructure that serves 5 different modes on that same sort of footprint or road right-of-way. So that's an example of work that's underway right now. Construction is about to begin here at this intersection. This is, there'll be some significant earthworks and retaining wall geotechnical work being done here to provide the footprint for this new intersection that will have left turn lanes, improved lighting, new crosswalks, and it will help with the flow and efficiency and safety at this intersection. Similarly, work is underway at the moment at McKee and McKee. Again, improved lighting, new sidewalk, boulevard, cycling accommodation, crosswalks, sidewalks, boulevards, all of our current engineering standards going on to help with the flow there. And tendering this month is a emergency signal for our fire hall number 1. So when a call for service happens and our crews jump into whichever vehicle apparatus they need for their call for service, we'll stop traffic on the 4-lane arterial road of George Ferguson while they leave. And that will help improve their response time and safety. Some existing signals that we are upgrading over on Town Hill at Fir Hill and Ridgeview. It's underway right now. We are better aligning this intersection. We have added the dedicated left turn lanes and matching the signal to that, improving the lighting and making accessibility better. Same over on the same road, just further up at Blue Ridge. Just giving you a snapshot there. So this vehicle happens to be positioned in the left turn lane, and the signal in the background there doesn't have the advanced green arrow. So we are adding that, and that just helps with the flow and efficiency and safety at that intersection. And I'm not sure how many people have been out on the Fraser Highway lately, but you'll see that we are essentially substantially complete. There's a little bit of cleanup work still to remain to be done, but we have expanded capacity. We've added, as this picture indicates, some improved bike lanes, some improved turn capacity for right turns and left turns. This is at Ross. Every intersection slightly different to meet its needs. This is phase 1 of future phases that will continue this, but for right now we have improved the capacity, efficiency, and lighting of the corridor. Marshall Road will be opening at the end of this year, very soon. This was important to know that I think everybody understood previously from this announced project the importance of it connecting to our industrial area to the 16th Avenue corridor. This is going to take pressure off of Fraser Highway, off the Highway 1. It's a very important connection, and it will be opening soon, and we're very fortunate that that's going to be the case. Another one, everyone's aware of this. I won't get in front of our mayor and council announcing when this is opening. It's opening very soon. This one is connected to the Nexus Lane and the Highway 1 border crossing project that we partnered with the Ministry of Transportation and the railway companies on. Ground separation is the key here on this overpass. In the distance, you see the roundabout at Riverside. Accommodates pedestrians and cyclists, and it is a much needed efficiency improvement in that area. I think everybody from the city understands that, so we're all looking forward to this opening up very, very soon. Oh, sorry, one last note, the last bullet there, it also serves for a bigger purpose of the extraordinary height and width loads that come through Abbotsford, passing through our community. Without this being open, the previous detour route was very awkward, so this makes a more efficient route for vehicles coming from the lower mainland that need to travel to points eastward and vice versa. This relieves them from having to detour way south to 4th Avenue, potentially get caught up in border issues, railway crossings, and is a more streamlined. So the province, one of the reasons why they partnered with us on this one was also to get an improved extraordinary load width route for them. Over to the bridge program. So we have 52 structures, bridges in Abbotsford. They get inspected every 3 years. They have annual bridge maintenance on them. Sometimes there's larger issues at play, so we have an annual bridge betterment program that addresses those. That can include replacements of end-of-life structures. Our last one was just done in 2021 at the floods out in Sumas Prairie. And yeah, our structures now, as we grow as a city, used to be more representative in the picture in the bottom left there, but we are now starting to get the larger structures that a bigger city gets, like Salton Road for the pedestrian or the new Vi Road. So we are growing there. Just a note too, though, about the flood recovery. In my capacity in the last couple of years, I've been helping out in this area. So the bridge program that would normally be done by transportation, some of the structures were damaged and have been repaired by the flood recovery through the province. So getting some provincial financial aid for them, and just a couple of representative photos of number 4 Road as an example. One bridge, I'm not sure if people have been out to Barrowtown lately, but the old Highway 1 bridge, which is just south of Barrowtown, came to the end of its life. It was devolved to us from the province, and with some funding for removal. So the old bridge had, I don't want to be wrong here, I think about 90 of those creosote soaked wood pilings. And so not just environmentally improved now, but that old structure was at the end of its life, and that has recently been removed. Some final remediation works are to be taken place there in the bottom right, but you could sort of see before, during, and after there. And that sort of concludes the bridge part. So over to transit. This year, predominantly, I'll remember it for 2 things. One was the 5-month strike from the operating company with their unionized workers. They resolved it, which is nice. The second thing I'll remember this year with Transit 4 is that we've hit an all-time high in Abbotsford. Our transit ridership has never been higher. We were previously proud to report back in 2019 our highest ever, and then the COVID years happened where everything changed in transportation. People were working from home, nobody wanted to be out in public. Our transit ridership dropped by 80% from what was our previous high, and the big question was, would it ever come back? Were we ever going to see high ridership on public transportation again? And we have just absolutely punched through that thinking into 122% of what our previous high was. So that really tells us a few things, that we are starting to grow as a city, grow in our urban areas, on our frequent transit network, starting to see capacity bus routes. So now it's on us with our planners at BC Transit to really target expansions for the future in the right way, aligning those expansions with development. So we have presented previously to council our expansion plans for the future. It's going to start with actually a handy dart expansion next year. And BC Transit is consistently adding new ways and make it more accessible for people to ride transit. There's new apps and payment methods that make it a lot more convenient to just jump on a bus and go. And we have initiatives like free transit for 12 and under and more things like that to come. So the first bullet point, if you want to hang on to something, is that there's about 14,000 people a day riding transit now in Abbotsford. And that is significant if you didn't know. So furthering that, one of the things that allow us to have a more robust transit network is the infrastructure that supports it. This is the Montrose Transit Exchange that we are very close to awarding. I think evaluations, it was tendered, it's closed, and evaluations by staff are underway. Report to council coming soon for award and construction to begin as soon as next month. Take just over or around a year to complete, and it will be it ticks the box for a few things actually in our city. It is what we need for our transit system, but it also will help revitalize that block as well. We know our downtown is changing, it's gentrifying, it's improving, and this takes about 2 blocks of that frontage works. So we get the space we need for our transit system, and we sort of put today's standards of engineering on 2 blocks in our downtown. So. And the last thing, just on the financial point of that, there we go. The senior levels of government partnership here is really important. The city is actually contributing about 20% in total to that project. So that's a big dollar figure. And I just want everybody to be clear on that we're very fortunate to partner with senior levels of government on this one. This is a very busy slide, and at first I didn't like it, but then I was actually, I'm glad it looks like this. The rail component to our transportation system is sometimes overlooked, and it's actually significant. So I believe there is a laser pointer here. So in the, this will probably only show for committee members in the room, but this purple line that I'm traveling on here is our Southern Railway of BC line. It's the old inter-urban railway line. It is provincially regulated and operated by Southern Railway. We have Canadian Pacific that starts at the border running north-south, and it goes through our community and across and goes up into Mission, where it heads into the Lower Mainland. And we have CN that runs along west or east to west along the banks of the Fraser and heads into the city that way. So those CN and CP are federally regulated, and all railways fall under the sort of the safety and regulation set forth by Transport Canada. So why that is important and why the screen is so busy is some of those rail lines were here first, and we connected as a city our roads to that, in which case we call that them being senior. In other cases, our road might have been there first and the railway came through afterwards and we're senior. That becomes important when Transport Canada puts safety regulations around each one of these crossings. So there's engineering work. Each one of those boxes is representative of staff here from the city of Abbotsford, working with the rail companies under Transport Canada at each one of those bullet points. And then, so the things that you see there, the signage, the road markings, sometimes there's gate arms, that's all representative of railway safety work that we do here. And then we come forward with this slide here. So this shows where we have whistle cessation programs in place where we're trying to advance that for our residents. And then we have Transport Canada regulation that requires us to do crossing upgrades. So we have to do work for each one of those yellow, orangey circles at those railway crossings, and the blue indicates where we are trying to advance some initiatives for our community. And so, sorry, yeah, go
There's
ahead.
one missing. On page 23, it would be just west of Bowman Road. There is another private driveway.
Private driveways, there's actually, if we want to get into the weeds, I love that you went into the weeds. There's actually a few more private driveways that believe it or not, made the slide almost unreadable.
Okay.
So some of the private drives actually aren't on there, and I'm thinking one's closer to Majuba Hill.
Yeah.
So,
But there is one there's a couple
Yeah.
on here.
okay.
So how do some make the cut and some don't?
It says this is an internal sort of document that could have been identified either by us or by the railway companies. It wasn't supposed to be an exhaustive list, but it's supposed to be representative. So I did note a couple that I'm aware of on Majuba Hill.
Yep, here you go.
And so it's quite possible there's a couple that aren't shown on there as well too. I bet if we looked closer out in the Matsqui Prairie, in roads near Bell and Baharrel and such. I bet there's a few more farmer crossings out there that haven't been identified as well too. It's okay, it wasn't meant to show everyone, but these show level of work that have been done by our staff this year on. So there's probably a few out there like that.
Thank you.
No worries. Over on the cycling program, one that we're currently working on that we've got a tender coming for in the early next year is a Sumas to Delair. I've just taken this snippet to just give a representative look at what it is. It is defined as a bikeway, but it does more than that, and so many of our projects are like that. It's given a title, but what we actually do is, in this case, certainly we are constructing a bike lane, but its connectivity with the adjacent road network means we're changing alignment of roads, we're adding boulevards, lighting, we're putting crosswalks in and driveway connections. So there's more going on than just a cycling program, but the ultimate goal or the ultimate end product will be cycling infrastructure that connects Highway 11 or Sumas Way as we know it over to Del Air Park at Yale Road. And here's a development that was constructed up on Sumas Mountain between Dawson and Farina. There was some deep culvert repair, geotechnical work that needed to be done. There was an opportunity with that work happening for us to build on top of that work and connect that community development towards the north end by Dawson and give a multi-use pathway that runs down to Farina, which is the connection into Augustin for that community up there. So that work is well underway right now. We just had a 4 or 5 day road closure up there while the deep underground work was completed. So I believe the road is now open, and the plan is to make that up connection down to Farina. In town, we have a sidewalk connection where development left off, and there is a gap between that development down to Marshall, which connects down towards the hospital and fills in a gap in an urban area. And for walking infrastructure, we have some new crosswalks going in at Town Line, Blue Ridge, and Donegal. And all those are under construction right now. Those are all the before pictures. I believe Donegal is substantially complete now and is almost done. The other two are in various stages of construction, but I just wanted to give an example of the before pictures so you could envision yourself or somebody else trying to make these crossings without any assistance. So we are trying to go into various neighborhoods around our city where we have not accommodated pedestrians walking. And that's where we are. And speaking of which, in the more urban parts of our city, every year we add these pedestrian countdown timers. This, we find, obviously helps first the pedestrian and whether they have their decisions whether to go into traffic or not. But we actually find it helps a lot for the drivers themselves who are waiting, gives them an understanding of how much time they have to wait at the signal. It just calms everybody down and manages expectations. So these, you'll see just by the nature of the roads that we're targeting, we're going for urban arterial roads, and we do this every year, usually at about that many a year, anywhere from 6 to 8 a year. For the traffic calming program, I think I've come to this committee already with this, so this is just an example. We are 3/4 of the way through our list. I think we only have a couple roads left to do, Gillis being one of them and Augustin being the other. So yeah, we're essentially done this program, but wrapping up for the year. And this is another road safety project that we are tackling, McClure and Clearbrook. Quite a busy intersection. This is work that we're beginning right now as it says, we're tendering this month. So we want to extend the capacity there. That looked a lot better on my screen. Okay, all right. Anyway, you can see from, well, what I hope this little slide would demonstrate is you can see that we're extending and adding capacity to those left turn lanes on the approaches to the intersection. This allows for improved safety and increased efficiency at this intersection. We're spending more time here. I believe there had been a delegation to this committee in the past about issues along McClure. We have been doing asphalt rehab programs and looking for, at various points along McClure, we've reduced the speed. We are spending time and effort on McClure, and we will continue to do so because we know how important that road is in our community. So this is just one more component of McClure that we're working on. Another road safety project that came, I believe it came to the TAC committee, so not to DTAC, but the precursor to this committee, was issues at this intersection. So this is us getting to the construction of it. It's to help safety at this intersection. The speeding was the central issue along Old Yale Road, and that made it difficult at turning in and out of Yale Court at Old Yale Road. So we have taken the opportunity to also address some walking challenges there as well. One more component of road safety is on power outages. We have something called UPS, uninterruptible power supply. It's essentially just when we have a power failure that the traffic signals will continue without, they have battery packs and will continue for, depending on the type of signal and how much is going on and how much battery power is needed, can be 5 to 12 hours of battery life. That usually gives the power company enough time to restore power without the traffic lights also being dark. The four-way stop procedure is the ultimate end result if even the uninterruptible power supply after 12 hours at an urban intersection, even that becomes a challenge for the battery packs to keep that going. And then the picture on the right is what you get, and that's a challenge. So we are trying to back up our signals with battery packs, and we do that every year as well. In school zones that are rural, we have a tough time on getting compliance to our 30-kilometer school zone speeds. When the schools reach out to us, we try various methods. Previously to the TAC committee, we came with a partnership with ICBC to improve the signage. That's the picture on the right. This year at 2 schools that were particularly challenging for us on Huntington and Vi Road, we tried a very brilliant yellow neon school stencil across the road. ICBC was generous and paid for the product, and we just covered our time and traffic control and time to put it down. And we are going to monitor its effectiveness and how durable it is. Can it handle winter operations? Does it still look okay after a year or two? And then we'll decide where it goes from there. And we want to hear from the schools as well. Did they feel it did its intended job or not? So we just tried 2 rural elementary schools, and then we'll see from where it goes from here. A couple of recent things we've done in town. Here is a picture on the left is a traffic camera. This is used by staff to collect data in a faster, quicker way. We have the capability to raise a camera, attach it to a pole, collect the data in a faster manner than before, where we would contract that out to a company and we'd have to wait a while. So it's a new purchase. We've never had our own, so that's good. And the other one is for our work with the Abbotsford Police Department. Is we have a mobile speed trailer that members will be able to hook up to their vehicles and take out to a scene in a neighborhood where we've had issues. So it just allows us to be a little more reactive and responsive to the public that asks for help, and we don't have a fast way to respond with like a major program. We can just go out right away with one of these units. And one of the larger projects that is taking staff time as we try and help the ministry with is the phased Highway 1 widening projects. This is one of the slides, an excerpt from one of the ministry slides that they've been sharing with us. This is their phased approach to working out in the valley. So engineering staff here at City Hall are currently working on the designs for phase 3A and 3B while construction is going on in phase 1 and phase 2. So we're trying to be ahead of that. We have things, we have weekly meetings with them as we try and make sure that the City of Abbotsford is helping them get there as they come through our community with the things that we know we need. And so on the right there, you see we've gone through some design processes with them already. And of course, they will be the ones that do the announcements of future construction and all that. We're just saying that we're, the last drawing review, as an example, they gave us 409 pages of designs for that. So it's representative of time and the level of effort to build what is going to be a very expensive project through our city, very important to our city too. So there's a level of effort there. So with that, there are some advanced works that are actually underway. We've got on this slide, it shows that there's a lot of soils in the median that are being removed and preloading of soils that are going to go underway. They've got tree and shrub clearing and removal, and these works are underway. Contracts have been awarded. I've been at 3 different pre-cons for 3 different segments of the highway with contractors. So they know how they're going to get in and get out, and it's going to take them a good year to get in. And there's a lot of material in the median there to be removed and preloading to that. So I hope that pacing of that was okay.
That's a lot.
You know, and I do want to be clear, these were tangible projects that if you drive around the community, you can see. It wasn't meant to be a rundown of everything that we do as staff. For the development community, you should know that every development that comes through our city, be it a 2-lot split to a big development, is reviewed by staff, and every special event, every parade, Christmas lighting, Remembrance Day, Canada Day, Sikh Parade, that all takes staff time to work with the organizers and the police on the, on those types of works. There's every permit, every contractor that goes out on works on the roadway, our staff make sure those traffic controls are safe and proper. So it wasn't meant to be a rundown of everything we do. We do a lot of planning work as well too on future areas. I know reports have been brought to this committee before for the McKee Peak and other planning areas. So a lot of staff time is also spent on that as well. But we thought there was a bit of a gap that we wanted to address to this committee for that actual work that you would see as you drive around the community. And we were hoping this presentation would sort of give a rundown of what you're seeing in your own city. But I'm here for any further questions.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate that. And speaking only as one councillor, I found this very informative as well. I was very happy to see it and to hear this presentation. So yeah, it gives me a better insight as well, which sometimes we lack. Not for no lack of on your part, of just simply there's so much stuff that you guys work through.
Thanks.
Good. So the floor is open for comments and or questions. Anyone?
I have a couple of related questions.
Okay.
Well, clearly there's a lot of routing work going on. Couple of related questions. One related to the Montrose Avenue Exchange, and I wonder to what extent the construction of this exchange will affect the exchange on Bourquin.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, actually, it's French.
Okay. No. perfect question, Ted, and through the chair. So the Montrose Exchange, we believe will inevitably replace down the road the Borquin Exchange, but not immediately. Several routes will still touch and connect with Borquin, but the goal, the long answer is yes, Ted, but not right away.
Okay, so that will eventually free up some land on which somebody can build something, I guess?
Okay, sure. I should have included that in my answer. So the Borquin Exchange, as it sits right now, is actually on the Seven Oaks Mall property. We have a lease as a city, and it was a mutually beneficial situation there where it was in 1986 when Abbotsford first got transit, and we needed a hub, a central hub in the city where all the bus routes would come to, and they would head off to various corners of the city. And Borquin Exchange at the Seven Oaks Mall in 1986 was deemed to be the central hub. And so that's why so many routes connect into it. But it wasn't physical property that the city owned. It was, the mall had the space. The staff at the time worked with the mall. They came up with an agreement. I've read it, it's on my desk, and it was clearly beneficial to the mall as they had everybody from every part of the community coming to them. It was central enough in Abbotsford that it worked from a city's perspective too, and without having to pay for and buy new land in the downtown and become a landowner down here, we got this infrastructure piece. So it will be a part of whatever the mall envisions its future to be. The bus routes will stay there for a time, and we will slowly reorient our bus routes from Montrose in the future. For South Fraser Way as an example, bus routes deviate off the main road to come around to connect into Borquin, do a bit of a turnaround, and then jump back out onto South Fraser Way and carry on. From a transit perspective, it's more ideal if the bus just stays on the main road and doesn't have to deviate and go off on a loop. So some routes we're going to look to right away, take away from Borquin, but some routes actually will stay there in the short term. So good question.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask one other question?
Hang on, Ted. Rob's going to chime in here.
Sure.
Yeah, just to, in 2018, we looked at our transit master plan, and we wanted to go from a centralized station to more of a spine network connecting up the university to historic downtown over to High Street, and concentrate our efficiencies and reliability along that corridor. And then as we develop the neighborhood plans to increase density along that corridor. And in the future, it's our intention to, at the end of High Street, is to be able to tie that into Metro Vancouver's and the SkyTrain and extend that system out so that it provides, more of a regional connection there. And so, you'll see a lot of density around South Fraser Way, McCallum, and that's, we've made these decisions around transit to try and, get people out of their cars and provide that efficient service using transit there.
Thanks, Rob. Your second question, Ted.
Yeah, with regard to bicycle routing, as a cyclist, my concern is usually about the continuity or possibly discontinuity of the bicycle routing system. Is there an online map that shows the current bicycle routes in Abbotsford?
Thank you, Ted, through the chair. I'm smiling. I don't know if it picks up on the camera, but I'm smiling when you said that we are updating that map right now. Yes, there is an online map, but it's undergoing a lot of work by staff right now to make it much more user friendly than what it is right now, Ted. So yes, we are aware of the gaps in our cycling network, and I did identify one project, but I guess the bigger picture for cycling in Abbotsford is, yes, staff are looking at our network and are coming up with a better map that is better to read and easier more user-friendly, but then two, our plan to address the gaps in our cycling road network.
Right, that would be great, because right now I use sidewalks. The best idea.
We don't want that, so we're working on it.
Great, thanks, Ted. Anyone else?
Perhaps I'll just close with, I'd be remiss, and I should have mentioned it in my presentation, for Tanis that's on the line with ICBC. ICBC has been great to the city in that they have a mandate for road safety in communities, and every year we submit to ICBC our plan for the year, and Tanis and her team will look at all those projects and actually assign some financial help to us for each one of those projects because it fits their mandate as well. So I just, I say it in person to Tanis, but for the benefit of the committee, like we're really appreciative and thankful because every year ICBC helps support financially each one of these city programs gets a strong boost from ICBC, and so I just wanted to say, thank you to Tanis on that. I noted as a bullet on each one of those slides which projects were ICBC funded, but I didn't explicitly call it out. So before I close, I just wanted to say thanks because it's a significant contribution from ICBC that happens every year. So,
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I noticed that as well in the slides. I was going to comment on that. Yes, Tanis, clearly the city owes you a big word of appreciation. We thank your support for your support and to make our city a safer place. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Very, very welcome. I noticed those points as well, Mike, and I was going to point them out, but that's okay. You did.
All right then. Well, seeing no more comments or questions, thanks, Mike, for that presentation. And there is no recommendations, so we'll just move on to report number 2. And we have Sean Gurney from staff who's going to introduce the tree bylaw update and introduce our presenter.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mike.
Yep, thank you.
Maybe I'll just do a quick introduction.
Oh, sure. Todd, please.
Hi, everyone. I'm Todd Sturtson. I'm the General Manager of Parks, Recreation, and Culture. Thank you. I'm glad to be here today. This is my first interaction with this committee. Just wanted to do a bit of a preamble in advance of Mr. Gurney, who is our Manager of Urban Forestry and Trails. So we have the tree bylaw in front of you today. What we're looking for today is a bit of input and guidance in terms of kind of some of our high-level thoughts on it. We are planning to bring it back in a subsequent phase with a little more specific language that we'll be looking to kind of hone in on and get your feedback and hopefully support on that language when we bring it back. So with that,
thank you, Todd. Through the chair, good morning, and thank you for having us today. As Todd mentioned, I'm Sean Gurney, Manager of Urban Forestry and Trails. Happy to be here today. Joining us is Danielle Pope, Director of Parks Planning and Business Services, and Camille Lafrancois, Environmental Planning Manager from Diamond Head Consulting, who have worked with us on a number of projects. Most recently was the Urban Forest Strategy that you may have heard of, endorsed by Council over a year ago now. And this was building off one of the action items, or many of the action items in that document. So with that, we'll get started on the presentation. I'll do a very brief introduction and then turn it over to Camille. Our purpose today, as has already been stated, to present to you our preliminary findings and recommendations for this project and seek feedback. We'll go over the project process, background and project context, of course, have a discussion, which Camille will lead, talk a little bit about our next steps, and then have a little bit of room at the end for some questions and answers, hopefully. The purpose of today, as just stated, receive guidance from the committee on the proposed amendments being considered in the update to Abbotsford's tree management bylaw, which is currently called a tree protection bylaw. We are going to change it to a management bylaw, more holistic and more accurate. Where we're at, the project process, the bulk of the background research has been completed. Much of that was done through the creation of the Urban Forest Strategy. We are now in the exploring options phase, and we are nearly complete with that phase. This is one of the final steps before we move on to the draft bylaw. So progress is going as per our timeline so far. With that, I will turn it over to Camille to talk about our background and where we're at, project context, and some of the big and minor changes to the bylaw. Thanks, Camille.
Great. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us today. So I'll try to keep the presentation somewhat brief so we have plenty of time to hear from you. If there's anything that's unclear, feel free to let me know. So in terms of background and project context, I wanted to start by just acknowledging a few things that were mentioned already by Sean in terms of where this bylaw update fits in. Obviously, there are a lot of guiding documents such as the official community plan and the urban forest strategy that are really important in terms of setting the guidance for the work that we are doing right now. As was also mentioned, the tree bylaw responds to a lot of actions from the strategy that I'll provide more information on, and alongside with that, there are plans to create a new city tree policy that is focused on city management of trees that will be coming later. The urban forest strategy was adopted in 2022, and it provides a lot of direction specific to updates related to the tree protection bylaw. Also worth noting that the Abbotsford current bylaw is somewhat dated, was adopted in 2010, and at this stage, the city judges that it lacks the outlook necessary to effectively manage the urban forest, which is a part of why we are looking at updating it at this time. Now, when it comes to tree regulations, of course, tree protection or tree management bylaws are always the first thing that come to mind, and certainly they are an important tool for how we manage our trees. But before we dig into that, I did want to spend just a moment to acknowledge how it fits into the broader spectrum of tools and regulations that have an impact for trees in the city. There's really three categories that we like to speak to when it comes to tree management. And the first one is those higher level tools such as your official community plan and the urban forest strategy that are really there to set direction and policies that would guide the intent behind how we manage the urban forest. But another important set of tools that I want to acknowledge are related to land use. And of course, zoning bylaws will take precedent over a tree bylaw to ensure that people are allowed to build to permitted use. And therefore, what zoning allows in terms of site coverage, for example, will have big impacts on how many trees we are able to retain and or plant in the future. And so that's also an important consideration when the city thinks about how trees are managed as a whole. And then, of course, finally, in terms of the tools that are focused on regulating trees, I did want to acknowledge that Abbotsford does have development permit areas related to environmentally sensitive areas and steep slope that will also have implication for trees, in addition to the tree protection bylaw, which we're focused on today. Without going into too many details on this slide, I did want to acknowledge that as part of those higher level guidance documents, the urban forest strategy is really built around 5 broad goals under which a number of actions sit. In fact, as a whole, that document includes 55 action items, of which we have 6 that are directly or indirectly related to some of the options that we'll be discussing today. So when it comes to tree-specific guidance within the strategy, there's a few actions that you'll see on the slide here. Action 4 is focused on updating the recommended tree species list with a few things in mind, including making sure that the species we're planting will be suitable in our changing climate. Action 10 is focused on updating the tree bylaw to align it with the strategy's targets to strengthen tree protection and replacement, including within those development permit areas, and I will be getting back to that. And then the third one you see here on the slide is focused on creating a nomination process for significant trees that would serve to populate what is now an empty schedule within the tree bylaw. More generally relevant, of course, is the tree canopy cover target that is included in the plan, which is 40% citywide, with no neighborhoods less than 20% in canopy cover over time. There's also an action that focuses on increasing tree cover in neighborhoods that have fewer trees, so less than 20% canopy. And this, of course, is an angle that's important for us to consider when we're looking at updating your tree bylaw. The last one I'll mention is a recommendation to establish a stocking level target or a tree density target of 60 trees per hectare for all new developments. This is also connected to that 40% canopy cover target that I was just mentioning, which is above on this slide, with essentially the intent to try and equalize canopy cover, increase it in neighborhoods that have less canopy over time through development. More specifically though, what does 40% canopy look like? The blocks, the city blocks that are highlighted here on the screen are at Marshall and Whatcom Road in Abbotsford. Those areas have achieved 40% canopy cover, so you can see in this case we've got a fairly concentrated area of trees with housing around it. The reason why I'm mentioning those two numbers, 40% canopy is a citywide goal and 60 trees per hectare for new development, is because in fact they're fairly closely related. So when we're looking at planting trees that would be species that will grow a medium to large size canopy at maturity, we estimate that it would take about 60 trees per hectare to achieve 40% once those trees have matured. And so if we are aiming for achieving 60 trees per hectare on new development, that would allow us to achieve that target over time. Now it's worth noting that this wouldn't require more trees if we're planting smaller species such as cherry trees. But generally speaking, that's why you're seeing those two numbers, and that I'll be referring to a few times through that presentation. And just to give a bit more inspiration and ideas on what 40% canopy cover can look like, you'll see here a higher density development area in Vancouver that is also achieving 40% with some of the courtyard trees and the trees that are planted around the property. Here's an example from a medium density where in fact you can see that a large proportion of that canopy is provided by the trees that are growing along the street right-of-ways. And then in a lower density example where we have trees that are a bit more spread out across some of the larger yards. So certainly there's a lot of places across our regions where we can see different ways to achieve a target such as this one. So now getting back to what you have in place right now, Abbotsford's current tree protection bylaw applies to all land except for lands within the agricultural land reserve and some of those privately managed forests that are regulated by the province. And on all those lands where it applies, it regulates any trees that are greater than 20 centimeter in diameter. At this time, in the way the bylaw is worded, there are little criteria related to how the city might refuse removal of those trees and more focus on ensuring that replacements are planted. And you'll see in the table here that the larger the tree removed, the more replacement trees would be required to be planted. There's also another category of trees within the bylaw, which are called trees that are found within retention areas. And so-called retention areas would include a few things that are also listed here. One, significant trees, which would need to be individually listed in a schedule that contains, at this time, no trees. Also trees within your stream protection and enhancement area, trees in protection covenants, and identified as such on development drawing. For those trees within retention areas, the city can refuse removal if it is not necessary for tree health, for safety, or to achieve permitted use. And in cases where those trees would have to come out, then the same replacement requirements would apply that I was showing you on the previous slide. So that's just a reminder for everyone of what is regulated in Abbotsford right now in very brief terms. Now, as was mentioned, we are at the stage of exploring some options for updates. So that's what I'll be running you through for the remainder of my presentation, and hopefully we'll hear some of your thoughts on that afterwards. There's two categories of changes that are that we are looking at, if you will. The first one, which I'll spend less time on, we refer to as administrative or best practice updates. And this would be really focused on making sure that while we update this bylaw, we make it as clear as possible, consistent and conform, that we make it also align with up-to-date best practices. We know the bylaw was adopted in 2010, so we want to make sure that we are responding to current arboricultural best practices. And then the other set of changes, which is where I'll spend more time, is what we call major influence. So those are changes that would, if implemented, mean more fundamental changes in the approach of this regulation in terms of how we are retaining, removing, protecting, or replacing trees. So I'll give you an overview of those administrative updates, just so you have a sense of what they include, and then I'll spend just a little bit more time on those major influence options that we are considering. So in terms of administration, one of them is looking at the permit information requirement to make sure that we can provide standardized and clear information on what is expected, both for external professionals such as arborists and for city staff, to hopefully standardize and make the reviews more efficient to ensure that applications are conform with the bylaw requirements. We're also looking at clarifying some definitions. For example, clarifying what means damage and what is prohibited under the bylaw, and ensuring that we have a well-defined tree protection zone and protection measures for construction sites. There's also updates that are going to be considered for the tree replacement species list, which I mentioned is also related to an action in the urban forest strategy. And then we will be looking at updates and penalties to align it with current standards. So those changes, in essence, are not really impacting the values behind the bylaw, really trying to make it more efficient to update. Now, as I mentioned, there's a few options we're considering that would have more major influence on how this bylaw is implemented. One, and there's 7 of those that I'll run you through. So the first one is focus on that significant tree schedule that I mentioned. The idea behind that is to create a nomination process to add trees to the schedule. At this time, we are considering initiating that with public trees, and then over time, eventually moving to extend to private trees. What this means essentially is once a tree is individually listed on that schedule, then it would require council approval to be removed. That is, if you will, the highest level of protection this bylaw could afford, and it would be reserved to trees that are very special and that are needing to be preserved to respond to really specific contexts and city values. The second option we are looking at is tree protection securities, which are refundable securities that could be provided at the start of a project and that would be refunded at the end of a project once the city receives confirmation that appropriate protection measures were taken throughout the project. These are fairly common in a lot of bylaws. Typically, they would involve receiving an arborist memo to confirm that barriers have been installed and that supervision took place according to the bylaw standards once the project completes. So again, that would include new securities that would be taken and refunded at the end of a project. The other thing we are looking at is revising the definition of trees that are regulated under this bylaw. You will recall I mentioned those are trees greater than 20 centimeter in diameter or within retention areas. A few updates we are looking at are including smaller trees within the environmentally sensitive areas and steep slope, simply to align with the guidelines within those development permit areas. We're also looking at including replacement trees that are planted as a condition of the bylaw, city trees of any size, and then yard trees that would be a requirement of subdivision. So the intent essentially would be for those trees to become regulated at a smaller size than 20 centimeters. Another option we are looking at is related to replacement ratios. You may recall replacement ratios, you have more replacement trees to plant the larger the tree you remove. A couple things that we are looking at, again, in terms of options would be to add a category for even larger trees being removed to increase potentially that ratio. More replacement trees needing to be planted to compensate for those very large trees removed. And also adding a smaller replacement ratio of 1 tree for every tree removed for those smaller trees that I was mentioning on the previous slide that we might be adding into the bylaw to recognize that those smaller sized trees would require essentially fewer trees to compensate if removed. And then a few other options that we are looking at, for instance, would be to lower those replacement ratios if the trees planted are of species that would grow to a large size at maturity, or looking at allowing saplings and seedlings when the replacement is taking place within natural areas or on steep slope. So again, in all of those ratios, in terms of consulting on how much we are requiring for the number of trees removed based on the size of the tree removed. On the fifth option that we are considering is specific to city-owned trees being removed, and it is to update the value that would be captured when those trees need to be removed for a private project to ensure it covers the cost of purchasing, planting, and maintaining that tree, as well as the amenity value of the tree, which is based on a standard industry method. Essentially, the idea is that the value compensated would be proportional to the value of a tree. If you have, for example, a very small tree versus a large, mature, really good condition tree, the value captured would be higher to compensate for the loss of those benefits, which we are considering to cap to make sure that we still provide it within a reasonable range. Okay, now we're back on that 60 trees per hectare I was mentioning a little bit earlier. There's a few ways in which we are considering using a tree density target such as this one to update the bylaw. So there's 3 items here. I'll take you through them one at a time. One of the ways that a tree density such as this one can be used is to cap replacement requirements. This would be particularly relevant for very forested properties that are, for example, undergoing development. We tend to find that when you are going from a use that is essentially forest to, for example, housing, those replacement ratios become very high in terms of the total value, and really to recognize the fact that we are transitioning a use, often because there is not space to provide those trees. Using a tree density would be a way to essentially place a maximum on the number of trees that would be considered for replacement on that property. If we use that 60 trees per hectare, then that would presumably allow us to achieve that 40% target that is within the strategy. Another way this could be used, which is also linking back to one of the actions that I mentioned earlier, is to require a minimum number of trees on new developments. So for example, essentially the intent here would be that we are not necessarily only building a bylaw that requires trees to be planted on properties that had trees, but also requiring properties that have very little trees to participate in the effort of reforesting or maintaining that canopy cover over time. And so essentially, if we combine those two approaches, we would have a cap on replacement on very forested properties to acknowledge the fact that they wouldn't necessarily be able to replace all the trees, and also would have some properties that would now be increasing the property because they might not have trees they are replacing, but they should also be contributing to some extent. And then the third way that this tree density approach could be used is to more uniformly administer the bylaw in rural areas. Those property owners often want to have flexibility to manage their forest. So this, the use of a tree density as a minimum that you need to maintain on your property could allow flexibility for trees to be removed as long as you're maintaining that minimum. Essentially preventing clear cutting over time, but still allowing people to manage their forests. So that's three pieces that we are considering essentially to try and align the approach of this bylaw with the canopy cover target. And then the last option that I'll mention, and this will get us to very close to the end of this presentation, is essentially looking at incentives for tree retention. We know trees take time to grow. And therefore, one of the options we are considering is to look at providing tree replacement credits when good quality trees are being maintained on site. Retaining trees that are already mature means essentially keeping benefits and saving decades of tree growth. And so that's one of the things that the city is interested in. So with that, I'll just close with a reminder on our next steps. As was mentioned, we are in phase 2 exploring options. We want to take some more refined options back to council, and there'll also be some community consultation on the options that we want to move forward before we get into bylaw drafting. And with that, we would love to hear some questions and comments on any of those materials.
Thank you. Well done in such a short period of time. Got a lot of information in there. So, ladies and gentlemen, the floor is open. Kevin.
Definition of DBH.
Yes, diameter at breast height.
Thank
you for raising that. It's jargon, essentially the technical details of how you would measure the tree diameter. So it means diameter.
One other question. There's a fair bit of ALR land in the city of Abbotsford. What is the percentage of ALR versus non?
75 to 25.
75% ALR? Yeah. And is there bylaws within ALR for trees?
Very few. We are working, I'm on a committee, an interagency committee discussing other ways of trying to enhance tree and stream management on ALR lands because there are very few laws or legislation that govern it presently, and the right to farm tends to trump most of those.
Thank you.
Good question.
What's the proposed new DBH?
At this time, we have not looked at an update to the 20 centimeter diameter that is currently proposed, except for those few categories that I had listed on the slide. So for trees within development permit areas, so for environmentally sensitive areas, we're looking at 10 centimeters, which is just to be consistent with the development permits guidelines. And then replacement trees would be protected at any size, just as a result of being a condition of the permits, and the same would go for trees that are a requirement of subdivision.
So 10 centimeters if it's in a DP area?
Yes.
Rob.
Where would you say are oldest tree, which might also be the largest tree, I know they're not always the same, where would that be? Would that be on Sumas Mountain?
So one
Most
of
likely?
our tallest trees is identified through the Urban Forest Strategy LiDAR overflight, was identified in Ravine Park, actually. Tall can translate into oldest, but not always. And that was a spruce tree, I believe. I can't remember the height, but it was around 185 feet, I believe. Age and size don't correlate directly with trees, often very misleading depending on the species. So our gigantic cottonwoods down on the banks of the Fraser that are reaching 2 meters in diameter are often less than 100 years old, but they grow very rapidly. We have some very old trees on the old MSA hospital site, which of course is looking at development at this time. So we're working, they're actually listed, some of them in our Sylvan Heritage, a book about our local trees and the heritage that surrounds them. So we do have them scattered around the city. Generally, though, our tree age is usually around the 100-year mark, and that's due to past activities in the city, taking down the older trees, replanting. Not many have made it past the development of the past.
So would these ones that you identified become some of these special trees that you had mentioned? Like when you say, you know, the special trees to the city, the only one that pops to my mind is the Christmas tree. Which is kind of, I hate to say, it's kind of an ugly tree, but anyways. Like, is there any kind of, you know, you drive to Tofino and there's a whole activity of going to the cathedral forest to go and walk through these large trees. Is there any advantage to pointing out some of these special trees that you have found?
Very much like you said, in the Sylvan Heritage book I referred to includes a tree walk through the entire Fraser Valley, actually, with a map that accompanies it, so you can just self-guided walk. But of course, with today's technology and the ability to everything, you can carry a map around with you and do these self-guided tours. That wouldn't be directly correlated to the significant tree, but certainly some of those significant trees would constitute part of that type of tour. Certainly something we're looking at down the road. We don't have the capacity for it quite yet, but on the radar.
Okay.
Ryan, so just a minute, Ken first. Go ahead.
When you talk about incentivizing tree retention, what does that look like? Is that just early stage conversations, or do you have a framework around that?
Yeah, the suggestion that we have at this time was focused on credits for the number of replacement trees that would need to be planted on site. So for example, if you are retaining mature, larger canopy trees, you might get a credit of a certain number of replacement trees that you would otherwise need to plant. So that's the incentive that we are considering at the moment, though it'd be interesting to hear if there are any thoughts in this room about it.
No, I think that's a nice easy one.
Ryan and then Ted. Go ahead, Ryan.
Mine's with, and I actually brought this up on the online consultation as well, but I find that the scale of the tree protection securities outweighs the benefits you get, and I think an example we just finished a development in Maple Ridge. It was 6 dump trucks of snow fence and trees to take that out. The trees we protected were beautiful, and none were damaged, but I feel like the risk of damaging a single tree for 6 dump trucks, and I think on a development we're doing here in Abbotsford, we're putting up our protection fencing next week, and I bet it will be 4 or 5 dump trucks, and I just think every municipality has the same standard, and it feels like it's just cookie cutter, and it would be nice to look at something that's a lot less wasteful. And in both cases, the trees are very valuable. They need some sort of protection, but I just think the risk of damaging one of them versus many, many trucks of waste, you know, maybe a single tree being damaged and not having that much waste is a better result. And I don't know what that could look like, but I just think it would be something to explore.
A lot of times we use more 2x4s protecting the tree than that the tree has in it.
Especially if they're 20 centimeter trees and you surround the entire 20 centimeter, you're definitely using more wood than you're protecting. So.
Good to speak to that if you'd like through the chair. Thank you for the question. Thank you for your comments during the consultation also. It's a super valid point that needs to be addressed. I'm working on it presently. We're actually experimenting on some of the larger sites with variations of the current fencing, which is not optimal, but better than using 2x4s. We're going to aircraft cable tensioned top and bottom wires as opposed to top and bottom 2x4s, and then just tree posts, 2-inch or 3-inch tree stakes holding it up between with a turnbuckle on the end and guy lines to keep it taut. Very fast to install, all the materials reusable. So an improvement, but I think it was you that made the suggestion of using the standard construction fences, which maybe it wasn't, but they're used everywhere else on a construction site, but for some reason we use plastic fences and wood frames for trees. I don't know where that came from originally, but yes, we're looking to change that and make it a more reusable, environmentally responsible method that's easier to install and remove.
Yeah, I think the construction fences and isolated small trees is a great idea. When we're doing mass protection, I do wonder the idea of, I can't remember, but the tents, but maybe eliminating the snow fence and just replacing it with, what's that tape called, like the highly visible tape? And I realize it's not a full barrier, but it's a visible barrier so that equipment can't cross. And again, just less wasteful. And every municipality uses the same standard, so someone made it one time, but everyone copied it. So,
All right.
Yeah.
That's good. The guy who sells the 2x4s.
Ted, question?
Yep, thank you. So Camille, a very comprehensive presentation and looks to me to be very well thought out. Just because I'm representing Heritage Abbotsford, are there heritage trees in Abbotsford that are, basically untouchable?
Through the chair, no, they're not untouchable presently. We hope to make them less touchable with a significant tree registry or something similar, where we pre-identify these trees, again, starting on public property, leading by example. Many of our high-end trees, significant trees, are on public property, so it makes sense for us to start there. Figure out the ins and outs of a significant tree registry and just how much it can hinder some other processes and whether it's worth doing that or a different method perhaps. But that would be a step in the direction of preserving some of our heritage trees. Heritage would be one of the factors used to denote significant. Significant, I meant to touch on that when you asked about tree sizes. Significant does not always translate to size. It can translate to rarity in the landscape, to heritage values if it was planted for some significant reason. It doesn't have to be huge to be significant.
That said, it would be interesting if you could supply Heritage Abbotsford with some, maybe some stories or comments on some of the heritage trees in Abbotsford, just for the sake of interest.
Through the chair, I'd be pleased to, and I just discovered the other day, coincidentally, and probably should have known this, but it's difficult to find records on such things. Some of the original orchard trees on the Mill Lake property, planted when the mill was still in operation to provide fruit for the workers. Still present on the site to this day. You'd never know it to walk by and look at them. They're little diminutive apple trees, but they've got heritage value. So yes, we will be identifying such trees.
Great, thank you.
Cool. Thank you. Further, any comments, questions? Sounds like you've covered all the bases for now. And we'll look forward to hearing back once it's got some more form and shape to it. And council send it back to the table for last comments, right?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's, as mentioned at the start, that's the intention, to bring it back to this group and other advisory groups when we have a bit more language built around some of these concepts, so we'll review that with you at that time.
Good, thanks, Todd.
Thank you very much.
Well then, ladies and gentlemen, we've reached the end of our agenda in good time, so that those who need to leave early don't need to feel guilty. Any new business? All right, then seeing none, I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn. Rob, second by Ken. All in favor? Opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you very much.